And then China, I cite China, I think 80% with admiration. I admire the Chinese because I've seen in my lifetime, in my rural village on Lake Victoria now, which should be renamed if you ask me, we are eating fish, tilapia from China. Somebody is farming tilapia in China. I do not know what they feed tilapia there. But they then bring them for us to eat, fact. And yet there is a lake there. We are importing chicken from Brazil and eggs from Brazil. Have our chicken forgotten how to lay eggs? You know, these are the little things that annoys one. And I'm submitting to us, therefore, in defining Pan-Africanism, and he's been at it, we are at it in different ways. Let us not imprison ourselves in this definition, whether it's state or this. What we want is an Africa. I'm putting it in a very crude way. I wish I was saying it in my mother tongue. What we want is an Africa where the boundaries imposed on us are purely for purposes of administration, where the boundaries do not stop one Africa from moving from one country to the other in an orderly manner. We are not saying that there will be disorder. Where there will be a form of government, whether the so-called presidents will now be called governors, I do not know. We'll find a name for them. But they'll simply administer that territory, but there will be a Pan-African government that regulates us on critical matters, on defense, on foreign affairs, on matters of the economy and currency, on the exploitation of our resources, that determines how we defend ourselves. And I can't agree with you more. You know, if today Africa, if the United States of America wanted to destroy Africa, it could do so in 1 week. This is how. They would station 2 carriers on Indian Ocean, 2 down south, 2 in the west, and 2 in the Mediterranean, and they would unleash all these missiles and would be back into the Stone Age. We are weak. And now, because we have bases in Djibouti, you have an American base, you have a Chinese base, you have a Japanese. In other words, Africa is in a situation which it cannot control. If there was a war today, Africa is a target. In a war that we do not know. We have been involved. When the European tribes were fighting in 1914, they don't call them tribal wars. But when the European tribes were fighting in 1914, we were there. And I'm sure there is a monument here in Tanzania commemorating Africans who participated in a tribal wars. The English tribe was fighting the German tribe and the French. Then they fought another tribal war in 1939. They're always fighting, and they involve us, and they weaken us. And I'm submitting that going forward, we must define ourselves, but not allow somebody else to define us. But I was talking about China as my last point in answering the question, why is China unique? When you talk about China, it is 1.4 billion of them. Suppose you are baking bread for 1.4 billion, bread, and only half of them eat the bread. You are a billionaire immediately. But here, you are baking bread in Tanzania. You want to sell the bread in Nairobi, Kenya. Tariffs. You want to sell bread in Malawi, tariffs. You want to sell bread in Uganda, tariffs. You have maize in Malawi. There is a glut of maize in Malawi and a shortage of maize in Kenya, and we do not know. So where do we go? Brazil. And one is saying that the reason why China is great is a true market, a single market. The United States of America is great because it's a single market. The European Union now is largely a single market despite the British wanting to leave it. It's a good market, a single market. And we must create a market where we trade. Do you know, if you ask any average student of political science today what is happening in Guinea-Bissau or what is being produced in Guinea-Bissau in terms of agriculture, they don't know. So going forward, we must emulate China because China knows what it wants, and we must copy them. You know, the beauty of being in Africa is that we can now copy other civilizations and avoid some of the mistakes that they made and make it better. And I conclude with one thing. Look at the mobile telephone today. Tell me, each one of us here has a mobile telephone. Each one of us. Those who are doing well have 2. Others have 3. Others even have 4. Tell me, apart from MTN, which is South African, and Econet, which other mobile telephone line is owned by Africans? So when you say, kuna salio, the salio is going to Europe. When there is profit that is being made, it is being made and being declared in London. That is our weakness. You've talked about chairs. If you look at what we have now, this microphone is not made in Tanzania or in any African country. These seats are possibly Chinese. This camera that is being used here is not made in Tanzania. The watch that he is wearing is not made in Tanzania. The shoes is not made in Tanzania. If today we were to say we abandon, we only wear what is African, all of us here would be naked, all. I'm being melodramatic in order to dramatize our plight. But you go to India, you find that the clothes they wear is from their textile industry. You go to Vietnam, which was bombed to the ground in 1975. Vietnam now produces more coffee than Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania combined. I do not know whether they have not brought McDonald's here, but they have Kentucky Fried Chicken. Do you have KFC here? So even our chicken must be fried like they do in Kentucky. There is no Mwanza fried chicken. You know, there are little things, but they are the ones that define us. Do you have water in Tanzania called Dasani? Coca-Cola. In other words, even the water that we drink now is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. That is how we are. And in a Pan-African Union, we would, in my view, we are not saying you'll eliminate all those things. They'll be there. This is a free market. But we must have products that compete. So in a nutshell, I can't agree with you more that there is something to celebrate, because this awareness in itself is a good thing. The fact that we have a forum, you know, I do not know whether young people here, have you read Nyerere? Because we are so oral, you just listen to Kauli ya Mwalimu, those sound bites. That is not Nyerere. Read Nyerere. Read Kwame, read Lumumba, read Modibo. The things we are saying here were defined. There are some people who think that you can have a sense of the future without having a sense of history. You can't. You've got to have a sense of history. Why do people have museums? To remind them about certain things. So this Pan-African movement, I think, is a good thing. And I think each one of us, it's Mwalimu used to say, it can be done, play your part. And I think that is how modest we should be. It can be done, play your part. Somebody told me something, he was from Sweden. I do not know whether he was right, but permit me to give you an example. That no civilization ever industrialized on the basis of another's language. Think about it. And he told me, he was from Sweden. We are a little country with no more than 11 million people. We train our young men and women in Swedish. Here in Nairobi, there are no more than 2,000 Swedes, but we have a Swedish school. Look at Sweden. Look at Norway. Look at Finland. Look at Denmark. Look at even Russia, the former Soviet Union countries, Ukraine. America is unique in the sense that it is a migrant country, but they chose to adopt English as their lingua franca. The first thing that a colonizing people do is to take away your language. Because once they have taken away your language, Mwalimu Nyerere said something that was very interesting. He said in Kiswahili at one time, I think it was in 1999, that, and he said it in Kiswahili, and I'm going to try and say it in Kiswahili. He said, nakumbuka mwaka wa 60 nikiwa rais, na George Kahama, those of you who can't understand Kiswahili, somebody will translate. George Kahama alikuwa waziri wangu. Sasa nimemtuma George Kahama Tabora. Wanasafiri kwa ndege ndogo tu. Sasa kukawa na msukosuko kidogo. George Kahama akaniambia, tukasema my God. My God. Kukawa na msukosuko. Akasema mama we. Ikatingisha akasema mama yo. And what Mwalimu was trying to say, that there are certain things that you can only express in a language that is natural to you. And I think that Kiswahili, being given its neutrality, can play that role. There's people who are saying that Kiswahili does not have the ability, is not a technical language, but language, one of the poorest languages on earth is English. Poor. Very poor vocabulary. But yet it is the most dominant language on earth because it adopts. It's like the ocean, it receives words. Lingua franca is now an English word. Safari is now an English word. Even Kiswahili will welcome words in order to enrich herself. So I think that that is a good thing. Decolonizing the mind is education. I think that education is at the heart of it. Many of the academics who are here, and I'm repeating this point, the academics here, how do we teach law? For example, how do we teach medicine? We must ask ourselves, how is it, for example, in African countries, we have professors of medicine, professors of engineering, professors of law. Here we have Muhimbili, we have Mulago, we have Mama Yemo in Kinshasa, we have Kenyatta. And yet, pole, when a senior government, until of course when President Magufuli came, is a little different now. But your typical African leader, when they are sick, they have no faith in the professor. They go to India. Does it not call into question our confidence in ourselves? Why do we go to India? And we are living professors, yeah. Professor of medicine, a physician, a surgeon, but we are going to India to a doctor whom we do not know completely. We don't know who he is, and we are confident that they are treating us. And you recommend, we who have gone to school, the people who have not gone to school are fine. They go to the traditional doctor and the things are concocted, and by faith they get healed. You remember Loliondo at one time here in Tanzania. People are going to Loliondo and drinking cups and cups, and they were getting healed. So these are the questions, in my view, that we must ask ourselves. What are we teaching? But we are not confident enough. We are too comfortable in our sites, we who are in academic institutions. Nowadays, when I'm a practicing lawyer, when I look at, for example, the tribunal when there was the conflict in Rwanda. We had the tribunal for Rwanda here in Arusha. How many people did they try? Perhaps not, very few. And how many billions did they consume? Billions. When the Rwandese government went to their own traditional systems called gacaca, they tried millions, and the society is healing. Which university, which academic has written a PhD thesis on gacaca as a method of dispute resolution? Instead, we are teaching in many African countries. We have people coming from the United States, from the United Kingdom, teaching us mediation and conciliation and giving us certificates. How did we resolve our dispute? Through mediation and conciliation. And you'll find a university in Africa say, we are hosting a conference of mediation and conciliation, and there'll be a professor from Harvard University to teach us how to mediate on marriage conflicts in Tanzania. Marriage. And we give certificates and we are happy about it. I'm saying we must do something about it. And it's this institution that must begin to do something about it. The other question that I was asked is about my definition of Pan-Africanism. Once again, it is the problem that we have. Because we think in English, because we are handicapped, even our thoughts in English cannot be articulated well enough. We are handicapped in our analysis because the language is not ours. So we are apt to say, for example, you'll hear many who talk against Pan-African say, there is classical Pan-African. You ask them, what is classical? They have no idea what classical is. You ask them what democracy is. They tell you, democracy was defined by Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Why must Abraham Lincoln be the one to define democracy for us? Can't we define democracy? Don't we know what good governance is? Can't we define it without reference to them? This is in other words, as I said at a different forum, we have been confined to think inside some books. Nowadays, they tell us to think slightly outside of the books. But I'm telling us, let us think without the box. We just eliminate the box and we begin thinking. Then we will begin to think about new things. That there's going to be the silencing of the guns in the year 2020, and there is no peace in Sudan. We should stop lamenting about it because we don't want to lament. If we talk about silencing the guns in the year 2020 and there is unrest in the Libya or in Sudan or in Mali or in Mauritania or in Burkina Faso, we've got to mention these things. It is by mentioning them that we recognize the enormity of the task. And uniting Africa is not for the faint-hearted. It is not for the faint-hearted. It's not instant coffee. He'll tell you, there are those who are going to dampen your spirit, who think you are a dreamer. You are engaged in dreams and romanticism, which will never realize anything. There is no shortage of naysayers. There is no shortage. But those of us who are older, like my Lord Judge here, will tell you during the East African community, there were things, it was a joy to have a common currency. It was a joy to move across Africa with a common currency during the East African Community one. That is why we came back again and said we need another East African community with a common currency. It was a joy for a Kenyan student to study in Dar es Salaam, to study in Makerere, and a Tanzanian student to study in Nairobi and in Uganda. It was a joy. We had one common education system. Now Kenya has our own education system, Tanzania our own, Uganda our own, Burundi our own. There is a sense in which we must harmonize all these things. Why should we pay $350? When I was at the airport at Julius Kambarage Nyerere, they have a list of countries which need no visa when you come into Africa. I look forward to the day when we will travel on one passport. And anybody who is an African doesn't need a visa. If you want some fee, there are ways of correcting revenue, but not through visas through fellow Africans. So I hold the view that there are things that can't be done. Then there is the question of somebody talk about civic movements. You know, part of our problem, and I don't have an answer for this, I think the way we were trained, and the colonialists was ahead of time. Let's give the colonialists credit. The colonialists knew that if we are trained in a certain way, we will think in a certain way. That is our default mode. And those of us who have gone to school, if you are colonized by the British, there is a way in which you think. Even when you are, if you are judged, my Lord will tell you, you think that when you cite a leading English authority, Lord Danning having said something, you think you are now most learned. Lord Danning said it. If you have cited John Stuart Mill in some economic, or you've cited some economic book written by an American or an Australia, you are great. You don't cite Zambia's Dambisa Moyo, no. That is the training, because we are trained to believe that we are inferior. And that is the ghost of inferiority is what we must exercise. Once we exercise the ghost of inferiority, then we are going to go somewhere. You know, somebody told me somewhere when my good friend talked about Kiswahili, and I'm happy that South Africa is adopting Kiswahili. A number of countries, we are beginning to hear voices about Kiswahili becoming the lingua franca of Africa. It is a